Excellent. What we're going to do today on our live lab, I've designed a little lab that we're going to do. When I mean design, we're going to do this live from the ground up. So if there's mistakes in the lab, we're going to fix it. Hopefully there won't be any mistakes. Hopefully it will go smoothly. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we are going to do an overview of what is Azure. And that's one of the interview questions that you'll get when you go and apply for a job. They'll say to you, okay, that's great. You're qualified. You've got some experience. Can you explain what Azure is? And a lot of you will probably say, well, yeah, you create virtual machines. That's Microsoft's cloud platform. It's a bit more than that. So having an understanding of Azure will really impress somebody. So not only are we going to go through this PowerPoint really quickly, and then we're going to log into the portal and do some really cool stuff. So what is Azure? So let's go through. You know, Azure comprises of compute, networking, and storage. And of course, we've got DevOps, integration, and analytics. We're not going to go through all of them. We're going to do some of the core services, as I call it, as compute, networking, and storage. Those are core services, because a lot of people will say in an interview, what are the core services of Azure? And so again, compute, networking, and storage. So let's fire this off. So what is Azure? Hey guys, it's not just a lovely shade of sky blue. Azure is one of the biggest cloud computer platforms serving millions of applications and integrations and customers. Microsoft Azure public cloud platform offers more than 200 products and cloud services, and these products are accessible over the internet. This collection of services, as Microsoft put it, is designed to help bring new solutions to life, to solve challenges and create the future. When you kind of say, well, create the future, how the hell does Azure do that? Excuse the way I've said it. It's because you create applications, mobile applications. People are creating newer technologies and integrating them with the cloud, and hence changing the way we do things. Azure was announced in 2008 as Project Red Dog. Microsoft has grown to become a major cloud player. As of 2021, Azure has 20% market share and growing, with AWS at 31% and Google Cloud at 9%. At this current time, Azure has 67 available announced regions globally, more than 160 physical data centers, and numerous availability zones and millions of users. How does it work? You know, that's great that we know that, but how does it work? Compute. Compute and Azure VM gives you the flexibility, like I say, to create virtualization without having to buy a physical machine or hardware. It's known as infrastructure as a service. It's ideally designed for lift and shift. When I mean by lift and shift, you might have on-prem servers that you want to migrate into Azure. It's great for that. So again, when people talk about infrastructure as a service, they're talking about virtual machines. Again, it's just a high-level overview. Again, part of that is the app service. The application service are a pool of services such as load balancing, application performance monitoring, application accelerating, auto-scaling, microsegmentation. So when people talk about an app service, you kind of go, well, I sort of know what a platform as a service is, but what is it? So load balancing, auto-scaling, where you can have 3 machines fire up after each other. It's also designed to run web apps, APIs, mobile backends, Dockers, and containers, and serverless infrastructure. I mean, you can run SQL now in Azure as a serverless platform. It's really awesome once you get your head around it. But for you guys learning it, if someone says to you, well, you think you're so smart, tell me what an app service is. Well, hey, load balancing, auto scaling, that's it. You know, you can learn more as you go along, but having a base understanding is really important. And then of course we have Azure Container Services. People might say, well, what is an Azure Container Instance? Well, a container instance is a service that enables a developer to deploy containers on the Microsoft public cloud without having to provision any underlying infrastructure. In a sense, it's serverless. You'll have all your apps, they'll be bundled together in what we call a container, and developers would then deploy that out to the cloud, and people would use that. So that's what a container instance does. And of course, container instances are like virtual machines, except they don't have the operating system. It's the applications. And that's why it's so easy to deploy them because they're lightweight. You're not deploying a virtual machine. You're just deploying the application. In fact, containers run on virtual machines. So it's pretty cool when you think about it. Again, your developers will love working in this. But again, this is just to give you an overview of what this service is. Then, of course, we move on to Azure Kubernetes. And you'll hear the term Kubernetes. A nice thing about container services, the service lets you run a container using a single command. But for more complex applications, we have multiple containers. So if you need more than one container, use Kubernetes. Kubernetes is designed to have multiple containers. People kind of use the term container orchestrator, and you go, well, what the heck is a container orchestrator? I'm a little bit confused here. It makes it easy to deploy multiple applications or multiple containers that have multiple applications on it. So just think of Kubernetes as a group of containers. Simple as that. So if you've got one container, it's known as a container instance. If you've got more than one container, it's known as Kubernetes because you're grouping them together. And it's like I said, it's a whole lot more than that, but it's just giving you a base understanding of what these services are. And then we have Azure Functions. A function is sort of like an app service, except it executes individual functions rather than the entire application. Azure Functions is a serverless solution that allows you to write less code. Developers would do that. When you provision an app service instance, it runs until you shut it down. And while it's running, you're paying for it the whole time. And you only pay for what you use. So a function, again, guys, so that you have an understanding, it runs part of the application, not the entire application. Your developers would use functions. You wouldn't use them so much, and you probably would, depending on your environment. But again, like I say, it's just laying some foundational information for you guys, so at least you have an understanding of what a function is. It's a serverless solution that allows you to write less code. And we're talking about writing less code. So therefore, it's a developer or a programmer's one of their tools that they will love and enjoy. I mean, it doesn't stop you from learning it. I mean, you can learn how to create basic functions as you go along. And then down the line, as I work with Kevin, we will actually do this live, not today, but we can do this another time so that you can just see how easy it is. It's not that hard. People like to make things sound hard to probably make you afraid, probably think, oh, I'm too scared to touch that. I'm not a developer, so I don't want to do that. So again, it's not that difficult once somebody takes the time to show you. And then, of course, we've got storage. Now, we've all heard blob storage, in seminars and Microsoft. There are even more options for storage than compute. This is because what I'm going to do in this category, I'm going to include some databases and other data stores. So the simple form of storage is called blob. It refers to object storage or binary large object. That's what blob stands for. And of course, it's a storage that has a collection of files. It's not like a normal file system because it doesn't have a hierarchical folder structure. It has a flat structure, and it uses unstructured data such as images and log files. Everything just gets thrown in there, as you can see from the PowerPoint. You just chuck everything in there and off it goes. And then we come down to, again, a little bit more on blob storage. Blob storage has multiple tiers. We have hot, cool, and archive. Obviously, hot tier is used for data that's accessed frequently, like your data that or your files that you'll access every day. Cool is infrequent access. It costs less than a hot tier, but it's there. And of course, archiving. It's really used. It's more for backup files. It is the lowest storage cost, but to retrieve your data, there is a higher cost involved. And it can take up to 7 hours or more to get your data back. So don't think, well, I've archived. That's great. Let's go and restore that, and we'll have it in the next minute or two, maybe tomorrow or 7 hours down the line. And you probably say, well, why do we want to archive data for 7 hours? Well, let's take an example. Government departments, medical institutions, they need to retain data for 10 years through because of legal issues and stuff. So they'll archive it off. They don't want to delete it because it's important, but if they need to retrieve certain information, they can because they have access to that archive tier. So it comes in 3 tiers, blob. Now, file storage. File storage serves up files that you can mount on Windows servers, Mac, and Linux using the SMB protocol, sort of like your map drive. we've all seen map drives in our PCs, on our servers. File storage is the same thing. Then we have another section of file storage called Azure Data Lake Generation 2. And you probably think, well, where would I use Azure Data Lake? That's used for Hadoop. It's a compatible file system integrated with a hierarchical namespace for massive scale and economy of blob storage for applications. And it's mainly used for data analytics. So if you're doing a lot of data analyzing and stuff, and you have really a huge amount of data like Wall Street and huge government departments, they would use data lake storage to analyze their applications and to put all their stuff in there, because it just allows that scalability. So that's what data lake storage is. Again, it's just a high level overview, and I've included it into file storage because I think it's a good thing to know. Sometimes people say, well, they don't need to know that. I think it's good that you just have an understanding of what data lake is. So someone says to you, hey, what's data lake storage? You say, well, it's used to store huge amounts of data. It works with Hadoop. And of course, it's for analytics. And you'll even get that in the exam. And then, of course, we have the SQL database. Let's talk about relational databases. Relational databases are SQL databases. We have an Azure SQL database. It's very similar to SQL Server, but here's the kicker. It's not 100% compatible. So just bear that in mind. And then you probably say, well, but we've got open source databases like MySQL, MariaDB, and PostgreSQL. No sweat. Microsoft's got you covered. They've got you covered there. If you need to run an open source database, Microsoft has you covered. All databases are suitable for online transaction processing. So Microsoft have you covered there. So you don't need to worry about open source databases. And then, of course, we've got Azure Synapse Analytics. If you need to build a data warehouse, then Azure Synapse Analytics is the best choice. As you can see in this presentation, I've got an SQL database that's broken. That's because SQL databases don't scale out and to huge demand. And an example of this is if you release an application that attracts a large amount of users, the traditional database can't scale to meet the demand. And the common solution is to use a non-SQL databases, as these databases are designed to handle more data than the traditional database. But there's a catch. In order for a database or an open source database to scale out, something has to be sacrificed. And that means it doesn't support all the features of your standard relational database in SQL. And you're probably saying, well, where would I use a non-SQL database? Netflix, Disney Plus, I'm just giving you an example, are streaming services. They have millions of people streaming their data live. So they would use an open source database, a no SQL database, because they have hundreds and millions and thousands and hundreds of thousands of users accessing stuff simultaneously. And that database can scale to meet the demand. It doesn't necessarily have to be Netflix or Disney Plus. You may have a company that sells products online. You've probably seen them on TV. Well, if you phone now, buy this gym equipment and you get this one for free, phone 0800. So you have millions of people phoning that number, like Guthrie, Renker. They're the ones that do these products. I've done support for them. They would use a non-relational database because it can scale to meet demand, and it's not going to crash, because there's nothing worse than watching Netflix and you're just getting into the movie and then it freezes and you go, what the heck? That's because it's trying to keep up with demand. And that's because stuff is being streamed live. So hence the number of users. And of course, I can't go on without Microsoft's Cosmos DB. This is an amazing database that can scale globally. So for your database guys out there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Cosmos DB is Microsoft's fast NoSQL database with open APIs for any scale. And to complement it, you can use Azure Cache for Redis. And Redis is used to speed up applications by caching data requested frequently. So someone says to you, well, okay, you're so smart. Tell me what Redis is. Redis is used to speed up the application, and it speeds it up by caching the data. And because that data is cached, it doesn't have to keep on going back to the database to retrieve that information. So that's what Redis does. So again, it's just giving you guys a basic overview and an understanding. We can go more in depth on all of these and spend hours learning all of these products. It just depends where you want to go. So that gives you an overview of storage. Now, let's move into networking. VNets. When you create a virtual machine, you have to put it in a virtual network. A VNet is very similar to an on-prem network. Each virtual machine gets an IP address, and you can talk to other VMs in the same network. As you can see, we've got Azure, we've got our VNet, and we've got our virtual machines in there, and they can all talk to each other because they're in the same VNet or virtual network. Subnets. A subnet is a range of IP addresses in a VNet. You can divide a VNet into multiple subnets for organizations and for security. Each NIC in a VM is connected to one subnet in one VNet. NICs are connected to the same subnet or different subnets within a VNet, can communicate without each other with extra configuration. So as you can see, I've got my main VNet here, and I can put subnets in. So I can say, all right, this subnet's going to be for finance. This subnet's going to be for sales. And I want them to be able to talk to each other. So hence the reason why subnets are important, because you can actually create a compartment and keep those compartments separate. It does a lot of things. It's security. It's easier to manage as we move along. So that's what a subnet is really. It's just taking, making compartments in your VNet, if you think about it that way. And then you'll hear that again, with our subnets, as you can see, by default, all outbound traffic from a VM is allowed internet access. But however, to come back in to your Azure tenant, you need to have a public IP address. So your VM can talk outside the internet, which is great. But if you want to come back in, you need to give access, and you need to have a public IP to do that. So I might have this VM and I'm sitting here at home and I want to remote into my VM there. I need to have a public IP address to do that. The key takeaway here is by default, all VMs created in Azure do have internet access. But if you want to come back from the internet, back into your VM, you need to have a public IP address, and Azure assigns that for you. Or you could, again, request a static public IP address. You'll hear the term VNet. If you want VMs from one VNet to be able to communicate to VMs in another VNet, you can connect the VNets together using VNet pairing. And we will cover this in another lab where we have two VNets and they can talk to each other. And why would you have two VNets? They may be in different regions. You may have an office in New York and an office in San Francisco, or an office in California, and they all need to talk to each other. They're on their own VNets, and they're separate because it provides security and protection. But again, if you want those VNets to talk to each other, you can set up pairing so that you can talk. Also, here's another thing that you note. Kubernetes clusters can also be in VNets too. So it's just some little tips and tricks so that you understand a little bit about VNet pairing. So someone says to you, what is VNet pairing? I mean, that's one of the interview questions that you'll get. You can say, well, it allows one virtual network to talk to another virtual network on, with different IP addresses. It's as simple as that. How do we connect? You can use Azure VPN. As you all know, what a VPN is, allows you to connect from home. A VPN is a private virtual network. You want to create a secure connection between on-prem network and a VNet, you can use a VPN. A VPN sends encrypted traffic over the public internet. That's just breaking it down. So that's what a VPN does. And then, of course, we have Azure ExpressRoute. ExpressRoute communicates between a private dedicated connection between your site and Microsoft's network. ExpressRoute is expensive. It's more expensive than a VPN because it provides high speed and high reliability. Hence, it's a dedicated connection. It's nothing like a VPN. You can connect straight to it, but Microsoft are saying you need to pay to do that. It's not a freebie thing. So that's just giving you an overview of what ExpressRoute is. It's a dedicated connection between your on-prem or your home machine directly to the virtual network. It's not a VPN. It's a dedicated connection, hence the cost involved. Some other Azure services, you'll hear about artificial intelligence. It's an open source model format and runtime designed to accelerate machine learning across a wide range of frameworks, operating systems, and hardware. So if someone says to you, what is AI? Simple terms, machine learning. That's what AI is. It's machine learning. And then, of course, we have DevOps. You'll hear the term DevOps. DevOps serve as a Microsoft product that provides version control, reporting, requirement management, project management, automated builds, testing, and release management capabilities. It covers the entire application lifecycle and enables DevOps capabilities. So this is what your developers would use. When your developers are creating a mobile app, they would test it, they'll push it out to some pilot users, and they'll see how it works and see what they need, what changes they need to make, what reporting needs to be done, so they want to go back as a part of a project. So we're not going to cover DevOps, but this is just giving you an idea of what DevOps is at the end of the day. And again, if you want to know more about Azure, see the link below. I encourage you to take 10 minutes, pop over to the Microsoft website and learn about Azure. So that gives you a basic understanding or a basic overview of what Azure is. So if someone asks you, what is Azure? You can say, that is what Azure is. You've covered all the main topics, and people will nod their head and say, yeah, he has a foundational understanding of what it is. It's not just, let's put a computer in the cloud. Anybody can say that, but at least you can walk away and you can say, this guy's explained to me as a non-technical person what Azure is. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to pop over into the live portal.
Awesome, Ryan, man. It's just awesome, man. You explained it in such a way that I understand it. It's like a book for dummies for Azure. So I understand it in a way that it's not complicated, because the thing is that when you're doing these job interviews, a lot of people don't know is that when you go into a job interview, you want to explain it in a non-technical way, because not everyone's going to understand the mumbo jumbo when you're doing technical jargon. So you want to try to make it as easy to understand, which is what you did just now. So, and you're into the lab right now, man. It's going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. So we've gone into the app. So once you've created your tenant, when you log on and you create a new tenant, it'll ask you for your credit card. Now, don't freak out when it asks you for your credit card. It asks you for your credit card for two reasons. One, to protect your tenant and to protect your environment. And two, in case you want to upgrade from the free version to the pay-as-you-go version, you can. So whenever you create an Azure tenant, you'll have an email address like this, saying, acloudguru@gmail.com, on Microsoft.com, or Kevin@onmicrosoft.com, or whatever the case may be. Now, that's great, but how do we get a custom domain in here? I don't want someone to email me Ryan@onmicrosoft.com. It's a bit more professional if I have my own domain name and say, look, I want people to email me at rocketlabs.com. So my email address might be ryan@rocketlabs.com. So how do we create this custom domain name? And it's one of the first things I think you should do when you create your tenant. It's just makes it more professional and makes you stand out from the next person. A lot of people create the tenant and they all use this. And that's great. But when you go and work at a company's not going to have on Microsoft.com. They're going to have Microsoft.com, Wallstreet.com. They're not going to be using this. They might say, okay, well, we've bought another domain name, because companies have multiple domains. So they might say, okay, we've bought a domain name. Now we need to, you as the Azure administrator, go and add that custom domain. And you'll go, how do I add that custom domain? And of course, that custom domain is in Active Directory. So if we go down to Azure Active Directory and we scroll down, you can see here, we've got custom domains. So just go to Azure Active Directory. It's there by default. If you don't see it in there, you can type in AC Active Directory and get it from here. And this will take you
Ryan, let me interrupt you for a second. I think you're still sharing the Adobe file. I don't think you're showing your whole screen.
I'll just close that one down. Cool. Just give me a second.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's just sharing. It's just sharing.
There we go. Sorry, my fault, guys.
Okay. It's okay.
So can you see it now?
Yep, now I see it. Awesome.
Cool. So let me just move back over. So when we come into Azure, you'll see by default you have this domain name when you create your tenant. It'll say whatever it is on Microsoft.com. And that's great if you've got a free tenant, absolutely, but to be more professional, you want to actually add a custom domain, because your customers may want to use a custom domain, but more importantly, your company. Your company is not going to have the company name on Microsoft.com. They're going to have their proper name like Microsoft.com, Wallstreet.com. So how do we add that custom domain? Companies have multiple domains. I've worked for a company where they own 10 domains. So how do you add those domains into Azure? If you read some of the Microsoft documentation, it can be really complex, and you read through it and you go, this is going to be, it's not as easy as what it looks. And you could probably say, well, where do I get my custom domains? Again, if you go to Azure Active Directory and you scroll down, you can actually see your custom domain names over there. If you don't see Azure Active Directory in your favorites, you can just go ahead and type in ACT and select Active Directory from there. And we can scroll down and select our custom domain name. So to add a custom domain name, I'm going to do this live. I have a domain name that I'm going to bring in to Azure, because we're going to create the text record and we're going to do the synchronization, and hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Normally they say it takes 24 hours, but from experience, 10, 15 minutes and it's populated. Sometimes it can take a bit longer, but let's do this live anyway, so you know how it's done. So what you want to do is you want to go and add your domain. So I would click add, and let me just drag this little window over to here. And once I've added my domain, I'm going to come up with this little window here saying add my domain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scoot over to my domain manager. Now I'm hosting a domain with GoDaddy. So I'm going to grab my domain name. Obviously, I would navigate to my DNS settings. So I'm going to grab my domain name, and there's no Azure here at all. We don't have any Microsoft information at all. So I'm going to go ahead and paste my domain name in there, and I'm going to go and say add domain. Now we present it with this, and we go, well, what do I do now? So the key thing is what we need to do now is we need to copy and paste some of these things into our domain manager. So what we're going to do is first of all, we'll do it step by step. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come back again to my DNS manager. And I'm going to go and add a text record. And of course, we're going to go in here and we're going to start adding these values so that we can actually get stuff up and running. So there's that @ sign that I've pasted. So we can have a look and see. Let me just drag this a little bit smaller. I'll bring it across. Just hang on, guys, so that we can kind of see what's cooking. I'll just see if I can drag this a little bit more. Yeah, I'll just drag it like that so we can see. So now we've got the first part. Now we need the destination address or this value. So very simple, copy that. And obviously it's minimized it, just bear with me, guys. And we're going to come down and add that value in there by pasting that in there. And of course, I'm going to use the TTL 3600. So I'm going to scroll down here and we can say custom, and I'm going to select 3600 and click save. That's it. It's not hard. Done. And then what I can do is we can give it a second and we can say verify. Now, this is said it's failed to verify the domain name because we need to give it a little bit of time to validate. It won't take too long, trust me. And then we would go and click verify because we've added that domain name information in there. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll go and add it and verify and it should be there immediately. It doesn't. It takes a couple of minutes to populate through, but that's absolutely fine. We can kind of, sometimes it'll come through very quickly. There we go. Voila, it's validated. It's awesome. So we can say, do you want to make this our primary domain or not? I mean, if you don't want to make it the primary domain, you can say, yes, I want to make this my primary domain. And I'm going to do that. And now we're going to move back over down to Azure Active Directory again. And we're going to scroll down to our custom domain names. And there we go. There's our domain name that we've just imported. That quick. Very easy to do. The problem is people like to make things more complicated than what they are. And you're probably saying, well, I don't want that domain name anymore. I want to use one of my other domains. You can just actually click on that and you can say make primary. And then that'll make that the primary domain name. So if I move back to Azure Active Directory and I go back to my custom domains, there we go. I'm back to my original primary domain name. So that's how you import a domain name. I use GoDaddy because it's very easy.
I think we missed some of it because we could only see your browser tab, not the whole screen as a whole.
Okay.
When you share the screen.
Okay,
This is the thing.
just have a look because
Are you sharing the Chrome browser or are you sharing the whole display?
I'm sharing the whole display. Let's just go and have a look. Say share.
Yeah, because people were saying, where are you pasting stuff at? Because they don't see
Okay,
it.
I'll do this again. Let me just have a look. It could be because I've got two monitors. Just bear with me. Let's just say share. Can you see that?
Don't see anything yet.
All right, just give me a second. This is.
You have to stop sharing and share again, probably.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing
Mhm.
and then I'll share it again quickly. And I'll do the lab again and we'll say share screen. And
Let's try it again.
Let's try again.
Yeah, I think it took the web browser, it took the browser only. So people were like, what is he copying?
There we
from?
go. So
now we see everything. There we go.
Okay, so let's do that again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go quickly and where I got that from is I'll just show you guys quickly. So in order to get up and running with your domain names, I'll just go ahead and I will delete that domain name.
Yeah, it's just I use GoDaddy too, actually. I never use it on Azure though, but it's interesting.
So in order to get your domain name, what we would do is, like I say, you would scoot over to GoDaddy. And in GoDaddy, as you can see, I've added this text
I see
record.
now. Mm-hmm.
So you'd add a text record. So what I can do is I'll just drag this over. And you can see here, that's my domain name. So I'll just copy that and we'll just do this quickly again. And we'd come down to this text record here. And that's where I take this @ symbol and this and paste it in. And you're probably saying, well, where do I get that from? So what I would do is I would just minimize this quickly. I'll go and say add custom domain, paste in my domain name and click add domain.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's from there. Yep.
Once I click add domain, this is where I get that information from. So I would go ahead and I would copy that. I would then fire up my thing and I would create a new, let's do this. Let me delete that. We'll create a new record. So I'll go and click add. And of course we can select, we want to create a text record. And you're probably saying, why a text record? Because if you have a look, there's the text, that's what I'm using, TXT. Yep. So I would add that @ sign in there. I would then obviously copy that. I'll bring this back up again. And I would go and paste that value in there. And I want to use a TTL of 3600. I'll go down and say custom. And I would select 3600, or you could change it however you want. And I'll click save. So now that's going to save that information for us. And then I'm going to go ahead and click verify. Now, this is going to go away and verify the domain. And obviously the domain needs to take a bit of time. Obviously it doesn't happen immediately. It can take a couple of minutes for it to verify. I mean, I know Microsoft said it can take up to 72 hours to propagate, but that all depends on your environment. So if I go ahead again and let's just hit verify, it just needs to think about it because I probably deleted that. So it needs to
you deleted it.
It needs to realize that it's
completely gone.
That it's completely gone. So we kind of just give it a minute or two. I mean, the reason I use GoDaddy is because it's really easy to use. And of course, with GoDaddy, you just go down into your domain and then go to your DNS settings. And then once you've gone to your DNS settings in GoDaddy, you'll get this information, because I've gone to DNS management. I've made sure I'm in my correct domain name. And then I've gone down and selected my domain again, added that text record. And you can tell it's got a Microsoft, it's connected to my Azure thing, because we've got MS, which is obviously Microsoft, and you can see there's my unique ID. So let's just verify and see if that's registered. I just need to think about it. Probably pop through shortly. There we go. That's registered. So now we kind of say, let's make primary. And we say, yes, I want to make that my primary domain. Now, if we move over to Azure Active Directory and we come back down to our custom domain, there's our domain name.
And that didn't take 24 hours. That didn't take 24 hours.
It didn't take 24 hours. And you might say, but I want that to be my domain name, not Rocket Labs. That's fine. You can say, click on that. And then you can just say make primary. And that'll make it primary if you wanted to. So what we can do is, I'll just move back into Active Directory, and go back into my custom domains. And sometimes doing a refresh, there we go. Can you see it's made it my primary domain? If I wanted that to be my primary domain, I would click on that and say make primary, say yes, move back into my Azure Active Directory, come back down to domain names, just do a quick refresh, and there it is. So that's how you add a custom domain name. It's not hard. It's easy, guys. It's really easy if you know how. But if you try and follow the documentation, it can be complicated. And let me also let you into another secret. Be careful with other domain providers, because their DNS settings will be slightly different to GoDaddy. So just make sure you add those two records there. Just give it a bit of time and that refreshes. So there we go. Now we've got our domain name. And if I went into Azure Active Directory and I went to users, and let's go ahead and say we want to create a new user. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new user, and I'll call this user, say, Kevin, and then we'll just come down. Now, once I'm creating that user, if you see this little check button here, I now can choose what email address Kevin's going to have. So if I choose that, it means it's going to be Kevin can have an email at kevin@myazureguru.com, and you go through and you can go ahead and add that user. So that's where you add the users to that domain, because he's not using that domain. He may be using that domain previously, but now you can say, well, he's not using that anymore. He's going to be using that, and you can go ahead and select whatever domain he's going to be part of, and you'll go ahead and fill out all of his information, and you will go ahead and create that user. If a lot of you don't know how to create a user in Active Directory, we'll just do it really quickly. It's pretty easy. And I'll just say Kevin and Ryan for argument's sake. And we can come down here. We can say Kevin, and we can say Ryan.
And then while Ryan's doing that, that's an everyday thing, by the way, on Azure. You have to know how to create ID accounts. That's just normal.
Yeah, by default, Azure is going to generate a password, and you're going to go, well, what is that password? You can click here and email that password to someone, or you could create a password. So I'll just go ahead and create a password. And then, of course, if he was part of a group, I could go down here and select groups, and I could say, right, he's going to be part of, I don't know, sales, and select that. So now he's part of one group. And of course, we can go in and fill out all of this other information, and we could click create, and that would create that user. And as you can see, that user was created successfully. So if I just close that down, you can see we've got Kevin there. If I click on Kevin, this will give me more information about Kevin, and it will tell me how many memberships he's part of. If I click on that, that'll tell me he's part of sales. I could add memberships from here as well if I wanted to. If it was on Office 365, we could go ahead and add some licensing features here. We could assign him a role again. We could go to role assignments, and we could choose what role he's going to be part of. Is he going to be a domain admin? Is he going to be a desktop administrator? So there's so many roles and features. And of course, in order to have these, we need to have an AD P1 or P2 license. I've removed mine on purpose because I want to show you this in another lab. so that you know how to do stuff from the ground up. If you go to a company and stuff is there, fantastic. But if you don't see that information there, you need to know how to do that. So that's how you actually create a user. And we can go in and do sign-ins and set up MFA. We'll do that all in other labs. What we want to do now is we want to scroll over and we want to actually go ahead and create a resource group. Now we're going to do this two ways. We're going to create a resource group using Cloud Shell, and we're going to create a resource group using the portal. So I'm just going to go ahead and dismiss all these notifications so we don't get confused. So now what I'm going to do now is, in order to create a resource group, we go create, and we can create a resource group or whatever we want to call it. So I'm going to just call this live labs. And you can choose whatever region you want by choosing the drop-down menu here, whatever region's closest to you, and click create. And I'm going to just make sure it's past the validation and click create. And you're probably saying, well, why do I need to create a resource group? Well, you need to create a resource group in order to create a resource, if that makes sense. And I'll show you what I mean as we go through, because it can be a bit confusing. But if we want to create a virtual machine or a VNet, it's going to ask us for a resource group. But not only that, having a resource group allows us to better manage our environment and better maintain our infrastructure. So now we've created a resource group. So let's go ahead and create a virtual machine. So it's pretty easy. A lot of you may have done this. You just go add virtual machine. And this is going to fire up the virtual machine. And as you can see, what's it asking you for? A resource group. So you can either create a new one from here, or we can go down and say, that's the one I've created. We can give this virtual machine a name. So I'll call this FS01 WinSRV. File server, Windows server, whatever the case you want to be, whatever you want to call it. We've got an availability zone. We can see where we want to put it in. If we choose our availability zones, once we set up scale sets, we will then have the option to choose how many availability zones we want it in. But here's another kicker, guys. If you set 2 or 3 availability zones, you're going to be charged for that server twice because it's going into 2 zones. So in this lab, we just want to have it in 1 zone. And we're going to use this Microsoft data center image. You probably say, well, where did that come from? Well, if I click on there, you can see that's where I've chosen it from. But again, if you go to all images, this will bring you up all of your images that you can use. And you can select from here as well. Do I want to use a Windows server image? Do I want to use a shared image? Again, we can go back to our virtual machine here, and we can do stuff. Where the kicker comes into play and where the money comes into play is on your virtual machine size. So if you kind of say, well, I've selected that by default, you kind of say, well, where did you get that from? If you go to all sizes, this is where we get our virtual machine sizes from. And as we move across, this will tell us what we're going to pay for our server. And obviously, if you're running a server, you want to have at least 8 gigs of RAM. You might say, well, hang on, I want to use this server. And it looks almost the same as this one. But now if I select that one and say select, you're going to see a price difference. And we just give it a second, and it's thinking about it. And you'll see it'll load the price, and you'll see it'll be more expensive, $200 a month. So it depends on the version that you want. So if you want to do a lab, like I say, you can scroll down and say, well, I'm quite happy with that version, and select it. And you can see the price comes down. Obviously, you need to give yourself a username. So I'm going to call this user AZ admin. I'm going to go ahead and type in a password. And I'll go and type the password again. And then, of course, by default, it's going to open RDP. I mean, we can close that. So I'll leave that open for this lab because I want to show you a few things. When we go next, we can select the disk that we want. Do we want to have a premium SSD, local redundant storage, a standard SSD? So all of these disks come into play. Obviously, if you're building a database or SQL server, you'd want to have an ultra disk depending on your workload. But when we're doing our labs, We don't need that. So I'm just going to leave it at the standard SSD for now. That's not a problem. Again, you could check that if you wanted to do that. Now we go to networking. And in our networking tab, by default, remember I told you in the PowerPoint slide, when you create a virtual machine, it's going to create a subnet and a VNet for you. There's the VNet, there's the subnet, and it's going to give us a server, a public IP address. And of course, we can go ahead and add it to a security group if we had security groups, which we'll cover in a later stage. Again, we're going to accept the default port for 3389, which allows us for RDP. If we were doing accelerated networking, which we'll cover much later, or load balancing, we could do that by going through here. So I'm just going to accept the defaults and go next. Again, I'm going to turn off boot diagnostics. If you have boot diagnostics turned on, what that allows you to do is, if any of you guys have used a server, like say an HP server, you would have an HP interface that you could remote into that server, an IMM interface, and reboot and see the post server boot up. That's where that would come into play. But we're not going to cover that for now. So I just wanted to mention that to you. So I'm going to disable that. And I'm going to go down. And again, if you wanted to enable RBAC, role-based access control, we could do that. But we're not worried about that for now. We just want to learn how to create a virtual machine. A lot of you may know how to do this. A lot of you may not. Again, we can say let Azure automatically update it, because I don't want to manually update it. Or you could turn it off and say I'll manually update it. We'll go next. Of course, we can add some more data in here or extensions if we wanted to. We're not going to cover that in this lab. We could go ahead and add some tags. I'm leaving tags out because I want to cover that in another training session with Kevin. And then I'm going to go ahead and click review and create. Now, review and create is not going to create the machine. It's going to go away and do a validation process. And if we've completed our validation successfully, we'll get this little green checkbox. Now we click create, and this is going to go away and create that virtual server for us. So once that server has created, we can then obviously use our RDP connection and remote into it. And as you can see from the little bell notification at the top here, our resource group was created. We're now in the process of deploying that server. And that can take a few minutes to deploy. So we just be a little bit patient while that deploys. And as you can see, it's creating a network security group. It's assigning it a public IP address. It's creating that VNet for us, and it's putting that server in that network for us. So it's doing a few things for us at the same time. And as you can see, there's my virtual server now. So it's thinking about deploying that. And once that's deployed, we can actually go to that server and we can RDP into that server. A lot of you may know how to use Azure already, and a lot of you may know how to connect using Azure already through the graphical user interface. What we're going to do is we're going to create a Windows virtual server using the CLI, and we'll create another resource group using the CLI as well. So at least you know how to do it both ways. You'll be surprised how many people don't know how to create a Windows server using the CLI. A lot of them can create a Linux box because Linux is a lot straightforward, but creating a server requires a little bit more information. So I have a little script that I've got in Notepad that I'll paste in, but I'll work through the script with you so that you can see how it's what we're deploying and what we are creating, so that you can learn to read the basics of Cloud Shell or the CLI, so that we can create a virtual machine. So that's going, while that's going away and screaming that, I'm just going to go ahead and fire up our Cloud Shell. And when you open up Cloud Shell, you are presented with this black window here. And you can tell you're in Bash because it's black. If I wanted to switch over to PowerShell, I could just go to PowerShell and confirm that I want to move over to PowerShell. And this will throw me into a PowerShell session. And you can tell it's PowerShell because it's got a blue background. If it's got a blue background, it's PowerShell. If it's got a black background, it's PowerShell. And you can run all your standard commands in PowerShell like you would normally do. I could go ahead and just paste in a command here, see what PowerShell version I have, and that tells me what version of PowerShell I have. So it kind of gives you some information, but let's scoot over to Bash and we can confirm we're in Bash. And as you can see, I'll just drag this down a bit. Our virtual machine has completed successfully. And of course, by scrolling down, we can go to our virtual machines and connect, and we can see there's our Windows server running. And that's fantastic. So let's go ahead and create another virtual machine. Again, before I do that, if you go into your Windows server, remember what I said to you, while it's running, you're paying for it. So if you're not using your virtual machine, go and stop it. And the reason we stop that virtual machine is so that you don't pay for it. And we kind of want the virtual machine to turn from a running state to a deallocated state. Now, when we talk about deallocated, we haven't removed the virtual machine. We've stopped it. Don't pause your virtual machine, because if you pause your virtual machine, you're still going to pay for it because it's still running. It's still live. So it's better to go ahead and deallocate that virtual machine. So while that virtual machine is deallocating, now you probably say, well, it's deallocated, it stopped. Well, no, wait until this message has said that it stopped completely. And of course, in another later lab, I'll show you how to automatically start and stop virtual machines that you don't use. So, because you may have so many virtual machines running and you forget to stop one, then you get a bill. And you're like, oh, I forgot to stop that. So I'll show you in another lab how to do that automatically. But let's now go and create a resource group. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got a command here. I'm going to paste it in, but I'm going to explain to you what this command is. So this command is AZ group create. And we're going to say, let's create a resource group. We're going to call that resource group Windows-VMs, and we're going to put it in a location of East US. So it's pretty simple. AZ, which is Azure group create. We need a name. So the name of the group can be Windows VMs. It can be whatever you want to call it. And the location can be East US, West US, Australia, whatever your case may be. Once we've got that, we just press enter. And this will go away and create that group for us. Now it's created that group and it's piped the information out in a JSON format. So if you ever see this type of format in Azure, it's known as JSON. And we'll kind of go through and break it up so that you can read that in English, because for some people, this can be hard to read. But you can see here, it's gone ahead. It's added it into my subscription. It's added that resource group, Windows VM. It's put it in East US. It's given us a name and it was successful. So did it really create? Let's go and have a look. So we come into here and I'll just bring this back down again and we'll just kind of do a refresh. And there's our resource group that we've just created, Windows VM. So let's now create a VM and put it in that group automatically using Cloud Shell. So that's pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and type in clear so that we have some more room so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste this command in. But before I run it, I'm going to read it to you. So you can see I'm saying AZVM create, which means create the virtual machine. We wanted that virtual machine to go into a resource group called Windows VMs. We want to name our server, because obviously when we're creating a virtual machine, it's going to ask us for a name. When we're creating our server, it's going to ask us, are we using a Linux server or a Windows server? So I'm going to say, no, I'm using a Windows 2016 data center server. I'm going to give it the username as AZ user, and obviously I'm going to use the password of password 1234. Don't do that in a real world environment. You know, change the password. Then I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And that's now going to go away and create that virtual machine for us. And it's going to create that VNet. It's going to create that network security group, and it's going to assign a public IP address. And as you can see, it's running. If that command was wrong, you would get an error saying it's wrong. Go back and check your spelling. and check you haven't made a mistake. 99% of the time when commands don't run, it's a spelling error. So again, like me, sometimes I can't spell English properly, so I'll go in, oh, okay, I misspelled the type that, or hey, I missed that command, or hey, I put a space in where there shouldn't have been a space. But this is just some fundamentals on how to create a virtual machine. And the reason I'm using Bash is because it's a lot easier. Again, we can do this in PowerShell as well, which we'll cover in another lesson. I don't want to throw too much down your throats at the moment, because I don't want to overwhelm you with stuff. A lot of you may know how to do this. A lot of you may not know how to do this. So we'll just kind of wait a little bit while this runs. And once this command is run, we can actually go in and actually have a look at our virtual machine. And there we go. It's completed that quick. And as you can see, it's created our Windows Server FS01. It's put in East US. It's given us a MAC address. It's fired the VM, so the VM is running automatically. It's given us a private IP address so that we can communicate between virtual machines within the same VNet. And it's given us a public IP address. So if we want to connect to it from home, we can connect, and it's put it in that resource group. So let's go and see if it's done that. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm just going to hit refresh here. Let's go to Windows VMs, and there we go. There's my VM. So I'm going to go ahead and just clear this up, because I want to show you something a little bit later in here. So again, it's piped a lot of stuff out. So I'm going to clear that. I'm just going to close this for now. And we can see there's my VM in that resource group. You can see my VNet and everything there. If I scroll over to virtual machines, you can see now I have that virtual machine that we have just created over here, and it's running as well. So I can go ahead and stop that virtual machine if I wanted to, and or connect to it. Obviously, a lot of you may know how to connect to a virtual machine. If you wanted to connect to it, you would just click that connect button, you click RDP, you would then download that RDP client. I would come along and click open, and I would say, yes, connect. I would type in my thing, which was AZ user, and I would type in that very secure password. And I would connect. It would give me authentication, and I would connect automatically now to that virtual machine. And there we can see I'm connected as AZ user. That's thinking about it, and it's allowing me to now connect to that machine. It's going to run through a whole session. Again, we could turn this machine into domain controller. We could turn it into a file server. There's a lot of things that we could do with this VM. So just give it a second. It's not our video cards or screen that's playing up. It's just Windows thinking about stuff. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and installed that virtual machine. It's up and running. It's going to come back and ask us to do a few little bits and pieces. We can say no. And of course, because it's a Windows Server Manager is going to pop up shortly. And then we can go ahead and close Windows Server Manager down. But in a sense, we can go ahead now and use that virtual machine and do work on it. So that's how you connect to a virtual machine that we've just created through the CLI. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that machine because we don't need to be connected to it. And of course, we can go ahead back over to our virtual machines. I could then select that virtual machine. Sorry, not the subscription, select the virtual machine. And of course, we can see it's running, and we can actually work on it from there. So I can go ahead and stop that virtual machine. Now, let's say you create a virtual machine, a little tip, and you go, what's the password? I forgot what the password is. I can't connect. Oh, I've got to delete that virtual machine, and I've got to create it all over again. No. Scroll down to troubleshooting and support, password reset. And then obviously you need to type in the username. So we would say AZ user, and I'll go and change that password to a secure password. And update. and that's doing a password reset straight on that virtual machine. And you can do that while that password reset is running. It's resetting the password. So now if I try to log into that virtual machine with that really secure password, password 123, it's not going to allow me to connect. It's going to say, no, you can't connect. So you'll kind of see from the notification area, we just need to wait a little bit while that password reset runs. So I can close that down. Now I want to scoot over to Active Directory as well quickly and just show you another little tip. Now let's say you're in Azure Active Directory and the user says, I forgot my password. I can select Kevin and do a password reset straight from here as well. So you can go ahead and reset the password for Kevin. I could say reset password, and I'll just close that notification down. And that's the password. You can copy and paste that password to Kevin, and you can say, all right, Kevin, that's your password. And then obviously when Kevin logs on, it'll prompt him to change his password to a new password. So I could copy that. Now, if I had to go ahead and log in as Kevin, it would prompt me, and then I would go ahead and log in using that new password. So you can do any Active Directory password reset in Active Directory and on your virtual machines without having to stress out and thinking, well, how do I do this? Because sometimes we forget passwords, we forget how to do things. So now again, if I come back into my virtual server and I say, well, let's go ahead and do a restart. Say, okay, let's restart that server. And if I try to log in with the existing password, it's going to say, no, you can't log in with that password because that password has been changed. I'll get an error. So I'm going to dismiss that again. If I came down here and I said, let's RDPN, I could say download the RDP file. Obviously the RDP file is there already. It's not going to change. So I could use that same RDP file. I would say connect. And then if I go ahead and I typed in that other password, which was P8SSW0RD1234, it's going to come back and saying, no, we can't connect. And I know it's going to fail because look how long it's taking. Normally it's pretty quick. So it's thinking about connecting, but it's going to time out very shortly. And there we go. It says, it could not connect. Now, if I typed in that other password that I recreated and said connect, this should allow me to go ahead now and authenticate. And because I've got this now, I can click yes and log straight back into that box again. So it only takes a few minutes to do that. And then we're off to the races. So again, there we go. I've logged back into my server and I'm ready to go. So again, I'm just going to close that down because we don't need server manager. So I'll just close him down and I will disconnect that remote session. And of course, I would just close that down. I would go back to my virtual machines. I'll select my VM. And of course, I would stop that VM. And of course, remember I was saying you could assign a public IP address. So we could reserve this, but if you reserve a public IP address, you're going to pay for it. So we don't want to do that. So I'm going to save that. Obviously, you would reserve public IP addresses if you had domain controllers or management servers or critical servers that you would have up on there. Of course, you give them a public IP address because you don't want them to change. You want to be able to access them all the time. So what we want to do now is while that virtual machine is doing that, I want to go into Cloud Shell again and just show you some really cool commands. So if I went down here and I said, opened up this command and pasted this command and said AZ resource list, this is going to go ahead and list my resources and say, right, guys, there's my resources. This is really cool. I understand all this. This is awesome. You're going to go, what the hell is this? You expect me to read all of this? I mean, you'll go insane. So let me show you an easy way to do this. So we could resource this into a list. So copy this. Let me just clear. In fact, I don't want to. I just want to go at the top here, and I'll just clear this quickly for you. And I would just paste this command in. and we say, let's output it to a table format. How cool is that? Can you all understand that? Or could you understand JSON? This is much easier. This gives me better information about all my resources, where the VMs are located, what storage accounts we have, what virtual machines we have. So it gives me the status, the resource group, the location, and the type. And obviously, I could go ahead and save that as into Notepad or whatever the case is, and email that to my manager and say, there's all the resources. So that's one way of listing resources. Again, I could go ahead and say, let's say we wanted to list the VMs. I could go ahead and paste in another command, and that does almost the same thing. Now that will list out VMs in another format. So you can see the formats are really different. If I wanted to use it in YAML, which is another way, we could go ahead and paste that command in for YAML. Let's again list YAML, and that gives us that information as well. But YAML is like JSON. It's a JSON format. So I'm going to use the up arrow key and outlist it to a table. And that makes perfect sense. So these are just little tips and tricks to get you up and running. I mean, sometimes in an interview they may ask you, well, how would you go about sending your manager a list of all the resources in Azure? Open up a Cloud Shell interface, go to Bash or PowerShell, type in the correct command, it'll print it out for you, and then you can save that into Notepad. You can do all sorts of things. And again, we can do a lot of things with from here. And I'm just going to type clear here. And if I said AZ, this is now putting the console into AZ interactive mode. And you're probably saying, well, what is AZ interactive mode? Well, AZ interactive mode allows you to use and learn Cloud Shell. And a lot of people don't know about interactive mode. So if I went and I said AZ, typed in there and I said, let's say Redis or role, I could do role. If I said version or VM, and I could use the down arrows, said AZ VM. So you can kind of go through and learn more about these commands. So if we said create or configure, we can go through and use interactive mode. So interactive mode is still in preview, but it allows us to do a lot of cool things and learn how to drive learn how to drive Cloud Shell. So a lot of people don't know about it, I think, because they don't use it. So going into interactive mode and playing a bit with it is really awesome, because you can do so many things. Don't try and type AZ, because we can say we want to create an account. We can move over and we could, like I say, we could select the account that we want, and we can do a whole lot of things. But I don't want to show you a lot in here. I will leave that for another lab, but I just wanted to show you that we have another hidden way of learning Cloud Shell by going into interactive mode. Again, it's a really cool tool to have. And the reason we would do things in Cloud Shell or in a CLI is because they're a lot quicker and you get a lot more flexibility on how to use your environment. And like I say, at the end of the day, the lab is just designed to get you familiar with how to create a resource group, how to create a virtual machine, and how to do some basic stuff with the CLI. But now let's say you want to delete that virtual machine. I mean, we could go here and click delete, but we're just deleting the virtual machine. We want to delete our whole resource group. So we can delete our resource group two ways. We can delete it using our bash, and we can delete it using our console. So we'll do both. So I'll go ahead here. I'm lazy, so I like to copy. And then we say delete the resource group. And remember, this is all the resources that it's created. That's why we want to remove the resource group. So we're not paying for anything. We're actually deleting everything. We're keeping things nice and clean. And then we just click delete. And that would go away and delete that resource group. Now we've got this other resource group called Windows VM. So I'm just going to quickly just modify my Notepad file quickly to say Windows So I'm going to go ahead and copy my resource group name that I've got here. And I'm going to shift over to Cloud Shell. And I'm going to just drag this up so we've got some more information. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that command. And again, AZ group delete, the name of the resource group we want to delete and the location, which is East US, and press enter. And if you notice now, I've got an unrecognized argument because that resource group is wrong. I mean, not the resource group, the location is wrong. That resource group was not created in East US. So we could go through and have a look and see where it was created, and then we could kind of delete it from there. So again, while that's running, let's just go and have a look and see where that group is created. So it is created in East US. So if I bring this up again, Cloud Shell, and we have a look here, and I said paste that command in there, what do you think I've done wrong there, guys? Anybody? It's just, I know you're on live. Can you think why? If you have a look here, you could see here, AZ group resort. Let's take this out. And say yes, and scream away, yes, and scream away. So now it'll go ahead and delete that resource group. So read this information. A lot of people don't read this, and they try the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and it's not working because they don't understand how to read an error. So we just go ahead here and say, this is telling us we've got the command right, but something's wrong here. So let's go have a look. This is telling us this is how to create the resource group and how to query. So Cloud Shell gives us a lot of cool things to do. Once this is done, you can also go and do the standard commands like help, and you could type help in there, and that'll give you a list of all the help commands. So again, it's good to have an understanding of how to use some of the tools. I'm not saying be an expert in everything. There's a lot to learn. A lot of you, like I say, may know how to do this already. A lot of you may not. So those that do know how to use it, thank you for being patient so that others can learn how to do this. And I always say to somebody, remember, you were also learning and you didn't know how to do stuff. So it's always good that you be patient with someone else so that they can learn. And as we move through the various training sessions with Kevin, we'll get to learn to do more complicated stuff and work through with policies and backups and snapshots. And we'll use, I've got a nice little exercise on how to use Cloud Shell Interactive correctly so that we can learn how to create resources very quick using interactive mode. But again, I'll say to you guys, you've all heard about Azure, you've all heard about Cloud Shell. How many of you heard about interactive mode? I guarantee you very few of you would have heard about it. And again, Microsoft don't do enough to let people know about these resources. You actually have to do some homework to find out about them, or someone will come across it. Or if you spend enough time in the shell itself, you soon realize, okay, I can do this, I can't do that. Some things are suited for working in the Cloud Shell or PowerShell or Bash, and some things are better done using the graphical interface. So it depends on the situation, and it depends on what you're wanting to do. So as you can see, it's going away and it's deleting everything in there. And this can take a little bit of time to delete, a couple of minutes, because remember, it's deleting the VNet, it's deleting the subnet, it's deleting the network security group, it's deleting the private IP, the public IP. If the virtual machine is running, it's going to go ahead and stop the virtual machine, then delete it. So it's doing quite a lot of stuff in the background. So someone might say to you, but why is it taking so long? You say, well, it's got to do all these little things first, stop and delete each of those services one at a time for it to complete. So it can take a little bit of time. So it just depends, again, on your environment. Again, if you wanted to, you could just minimize that, and that would minimize it back again. If I fired up Cloud Shell, it would take me straight back to where that is. So I'll leave that running so we can come back to that shortly. So, and of course, as we go along, we can do a refresh. You will start seeing resources being deleted and resources being removed. Again, if I go back into my resource groups, and I start doing a refresh, I will start seeing some resource groups will start to delete. If I go back into Cloud Shell, we can actually see it's still running, and we'll just give it a bit of time. There we go. It's completed successfully. I'll just drag this up so everyone can see it. And you can see there it's completed successfully. We can close out of here and we can hit refresh a couple of times, and that would delete it. So we did delete that resource group. We just need to, it just needs to think about it. And once the refresh has happened, that would delete, and there we go. So that's how you clean up after yourself. So whenever you're using Azure, you want to clean up after yourself. Again, we can create storage accounts by coming into here and creating a storage account. Again, I'll leave that for other labs. What I will try and do with the labs as we go through the live sessions with Kevin, we will try to cover a lot of the day-to-day stuff that you need to know. Some stuff that's related to DevOps we won't cover. Another thing that we want to cover is once you create your virtual machines or you create your tenant, we want to go to cost billing, and we want to go obviously down to your cost management. And once this cost management window opens up, I'm just going to cancel this for now. Once our cost management window opens up, we want to go to budgets, and we want to go and create a budget so we don't overspend on our virtual machine. So we might say we want to add a budget. So we can go and say, let's add, and we can give this a budget name. I can call this training. Sorry, if I can click in there, we'll say training lab budget. And we can say, all right, let's bill it every month. And of course, you can see here, I've got what I've spent in the last month, $15. And we can say, all right, I'm going to allocate my budget to $20. You can always go and change that, and we can go next. Now we need to add a scope. Now we can say our actual budget when we reach, say 25%, then we can come down here, and then we can say actual budget, and we can say, right, when we reach 50%, and then we can say, right, when we reach the actual, we can say 100%, and of course we can come down here, and once that is done, we can just go ahead and create, and of course we can create our budgets from there. Obviously I have a budget already, so let's go and see if we can create a new one and click create. And of course, we can come down here and decide how we want our budget to be created. Do we just want it for the year? When are we going to expire? So I'm going to say I want it for the year, and let's just choose a date. We'll say June, and then we can go through, and you can see here we've got 25, 50, and 100% of our budget. We can go through next, and then of course we can go through and assign a user. Because I haven't assigned a user, we can't create that budget yet. So we can go to management groups, and we can go ahead and do a whole lot of stuff. So cost billing and budgeting is a really good place where to go to add your budget. So if I come back into my cost management, guys, go down to budgets. And of course, if you have any existing budgets, your budgets will show up there. And of course, you can see which subscription your budget is tied to, and you could select that. And you could, if you wanted to switch directories, you could switch directories if you wanted to as well. So it all depends on you at the end of the day. So my current budget is on Rocket Labs. I have another directory, that's my main directory, where I have my user and where I've created my budget. That's why I'm getting an error when I try to create my budget, because it's asking for a username, and I already have that in place. But when you create it, it won't ask for a username. Again, you can just go in, type in your budget training. You can say, right, I don't want that budget for 3 years. I just want it for a year. Select the date, select the amount, maybe $10, whatever the case may be. You would go next. And of course, in your action group, you would go and start entering your budget amount. So I could say 50%, I could say of the forecast budget, or you might say of the actual budget. You see it's asking for an email address. Now, the reason I've brought this up, I want to show you how to fix this, because we could go ahead and do this and not fix it. This is where the error is coming from. So I'd have to go and put an email address in there. Then I could go ahead and say of the actual budget, and say actual budget, and then I could say, let's put in, say, 50%. I didn't put it in there, I said 25%. And then we'll say 100% of the actual budget. And then we could go ahead and you can see, well, I don't need 2 email addresses. I can use 1 email address, so I can get rid of that one. And I can drop down and say, right, that's the person's email address I will want to use. If you had multiple email addresses, you could have multiple people that you want to send your budget to. It's all up to you. You could use the default languages. You might be Chinese or Korean or French. You could choose what you wanted to do. And of course, we could go ahead and just say create. And there we go. That's created my budget. And the reason my budget was created successfully is because I had an email address. Remember, I tried to create my budget and I got a warning here saying, can't create it. That's because we have to give it an email address. Now I can go into my training budget and I can see my training budget is for $10. So when I get to $3, it's going to give me a warning. Obviously, I did this back to front. When we get to $5, it's going to tell us you're at $5. And when you've reached $10, it's going to tell you at $10. And then you can see where you are. If I go and say I want to edit my budget, the only thing that you can edit is the amount. If you want to change your budget, you're going to have to go in and actually delete that budget altogether and create a brand new budget. So it's something to bear in mind when you are talking about creating your budgets. Again, cost billing, we can come down to budgets, and you can see there's that training budget showing up there. I could click on that training budget. I could say, I don't need that budget anymore, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that budget. Of course, over time, that budget would start turning green, and you would see what you've used and what you haven't used. So again, so that you guys understand, go to cost management, go to budgets, and make sure when you are adding your budgets, once you've typed in your details, like we'll just say test, I won't create a budget. I just want to show you one more time because this is important. Otherwise, you will get billed and you don't want to be set with unspecified accounts that you don't have. Let's say my budget is going to be $15. And then, of course, when you go next, this is where you need to be careful. Go and add in an email address. It can be your personal email address, at kevin@gmail.com or kevin@ryanandlee.com or kevin@bullsit.com. So, or whatever your email address, put your email address in here. If you don't put an email address in and you try and create a budget, you're going to get an alert here because this action group needs to know where to email your alert. If you don't have an action group, it's not going to know where to email it. So you're going to get an error. So make sure you add your email address in there when you create your budget, and then at least you know you are safe. So remember, again, start off with an actual budget, do 25%, 50%, then 100%, and then click create your budget. And the moment you reach your threshold on 25%, you'll get an email. When you reach your threshold at 50%, you'll get an email, and the same with 100%, you'll get an email. So that's how you create a budget to keep you guys in check so that you don't overspend a lot of money. And of course, and as you start using different services, the cost goes up. Remember, if you're setting up Azure Active Directory domain services, you will pay hourly for however long you are using Azure Active Directory domain services, or monthly. You also pay for your storage costs. Again, they're not that huge. You can see you pay for load balancer costs. Your virtual machines are nothing, 70 cents. A security center is nothing, it's 60 cents. Now, if I go down to security center, you will see that I have all of my things are all live. I can use them. On the free subscription, a lot of this is going to be grayed out. That's because you need to upgrade your subscription. So once you've upgraded your subscription, then these will become active. So it's good to upgrade your subscription to pay as you go, and then you'll be really good to go. Because if you go into Security Center, it gives you a lot of information about controls and benchmarks and and compliance and stuff. You can click on the compliance and it'll tell you what you need to do in order to fix your network up and to do bits and pieces. So you could download that report as well into a CSV or a PDF format. I could click download. That would download that report for us. I could open up that report and I could actually see what's going on within my environment. Great for reporting, great for management, and great for you to see what you want to use and where you need to go to tidy up stuff and where you're compliant and where you're not compliant. So it kind of gives you some really good information if you're in management. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down because we don't need to view that report. So again, we can go back to our main dashboard and we're ready to go. We can see what we've created. Again, some of the stuff is cached, so that will disappear on its own. You can't delete that. Microsoft will clean that up over time as you go through. So hopefully in today's lesson, you've learned how to create a budget, how to create a custom domain name, how to create a virtual machine, how to create a resource group, how to do that in the CLI. Realize that the CLI has another hidden mode called interactive mode. And hopefully you'll walk away today with some fundamental knowledge of Azure. And as we start working through Azure, creating storage groups and blob groups and file access, we'll do all of this and we'll connect it live from our local desktops to Azure. So we don't actually have to connect to the portal all the time to manage Azure. We can actually use Storage Explorer to do that, and we can manage every stuff from our local machine or from within Azure. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to passing knowledge on and to training you guys. And like I say, we start off with baby steps, but if we have a solid foundation, then the rest falls into place. And if things are explained correctly, then you understand what it is that you're doing. It's not, oh, let's just create a virtual machine and let's go. I mean, in the exam, they'll ask you questions. When you create a virtual machine, what else is created? Well, VNet's created, a subnet's created, public IP, private IP, a network security group. All these things are created when you create a virtual machine. So understanding why they're created and what they're there for will not only make you a better engineer, but again, you'll have a better understanding when it comes to troubleshooting, a better understanding when it comes to designing a solution, a better understanding when it comes to deploying a solution or even deleting resources from your subscription. So I hope you've learned a lot in this lab. It probably was a bit boring for some of you, but for some of you, I hope you found it interesting. And
no,
look
man.
forward to seeing you in the next one.
No, it was good. It was good. It was really. I learned a lot today. As like someone that doesn't like. I do cloud stuff, but not as much as what you went in depth with the command line and everything. I don't do any of those things. So definitely it helps me. It helps people that are watching. They're watching the video right now live, and I know because I'm gonna save this. Obviously, I'm gonna put it on YouTube. So people that are watching live, like Ryan has a YouTube channel, by the way. You should go follow him. I'm gonna leave his YouTube channel below in the description. But we're gonna continue doing these Azure training. It's just entry level. That's like the first. Because the thing is that I cannot, like, as Ryan said, it's baby steps, right? We cannot teach you everything in one shot. That doesn't make any sense, right? We can't do that. You're not gonna learn anything if we do that. So we start from A to Z, right? You have to learn that way. So you do baby steps. So when you learn how to entry level help desk, you got your help desk skills. Now you're like, okay, Kev, I don't want to do help desk anymore. I want to be an Azure cloud architect, right? But I cannot teach you that. We cannot teach you that. Like in an advanced level, we need you to understand the basics first, and then we'll slowly walk into the advanced stuff. And then when you actually go to the job, right, you're less stressed out. You're not sweating. You know how to actually do your job. So we're trying to give you real hands-on training, not like some BS training that you go to the job and then you can't do your actual job. It's just that I don't promote that. We try to teach you as much as we can, right? That's the purpose of today's video. So this is just for someone brand new. And then I'm going to create a playlist, right? With me and Ryan to work together. And I'm going to keep going to more advanced topics. And then you could just go back to that playlist and refer to that playlist. So then if you're actually starting your job as a sysadmin or as an Azure architect, you could actually go to these videos and they'll help you out. So then you're not sweating the entire time when you're starting your job on Monday morning. That's what we're trying to do.
I mean, absolutely. And the reason I'm trying to do these labs live and not pre-configure stuff is because if stuff's pre-configured, it's going to work. And you're not going to have any issues. But then when you go home or when you're in the workplace or when you're in your own environment and you try to create or duplicate what you've learned, you're going to have all sorts of errors. And you think, well, why am I getting errors? That's why I created that, forgot to put that email address in on purpose, because it's a common error that'll pop up. So you could see I've got red errors there. It just would not allow me to create that budget. So these are things that you need to be aware of. Okay, well, this is not allowing me to delete this, or this is not allowing me to do this. This is because of this. Or hang on, we need to set up a certain resource. And these are the steps that we need to do. When we do a lab like the Windows Virtual Desktop Lab, we'll do this live. You will see some gotchas. I mean, I've been to seminars that have been hosted by Microsoft and hosted by other providers. And they create a virtual desktop in 5 minutes. And they said, there we go, virtual desktop up and running in 5 minutes. You go home and try it, and it doesn't freaking work. It's because they've done a whole lot of pre-config in the background and they haven't told you. And then you get frustrated, you get irate. And then after the third or fourth time you say, well, stuff it. I'm not going to even learn this because it's just too hard and it's too aggravating. Where if someone had explained to you, okay, well, when you're creating this, we've got to do this first, this second, this third, this fourth. Now we can create our virtual machine, or now we can create our WVD. And then things will just start working. You know, it's quite easy to prep and create everything in the background. Like, for example, all the DNS settings and all of the management settings, you can do that in the background. And then when you come to create the virtual desktop, yes, it's going to be 5 minutes, of course. But you try and create a virtual desktop without doing that in the background, you're going to, halfway through your deployment, you're going to run into errors and you're going to run into problems. And you're going to think, well, but I followed the video, I've followed the guidelines, something's wrong. And I understand where some people are coming from. Maybe they're pressed for time when they're trying to do a demo for somebody. But I always believe that when you're demoing something, especially to technical guys, technical people, you know, guys and girls out there, that you do it live, because then you can go away and do that in any environment. Or if you're troubleshooting an environment, you can say, well, have you created a subnet? Is it on the right IP address? You know, especially when it comes to virtual desktops, you'll see as we get through. And the same with SQL databases. You try and connect to your SQL database, it won't work because you've got to go and open up the database firewall. You know, these are things that you learn the hard way. I mean, like I say, there are a lot of amazing resources and trainers out there, but there's also a lot of resources and material out there that can mislead you and get you frustrated. And then you kind of say, well, this is not fun anymore. IT should be fun. Your job should be fun. You should be able to have fun doing stuff and learning. And again, if you learn the correct way, you can show someone else, this is how you do it. And then the knowledge just spreads, and it's a win-win situation for everybody. So bear in mind, all the labs we'll do them live from the ground up so that you can see the step-by-step processes so that you don't get caught with your pants down, as I say.
And
like,
right. They said people in chat told me they like this. They like the video today. They really love the video. They're in chat. They're saying that they really love how you teach. It's not boring, and it's entertaining to watch, and they are easy to understand. So they really like what you showed us today, and yeah, it helped. It helped a lot of people. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but if you do, we're on Discord, by the way. So I'm on Discord. Ryan's on Discord. You could ping him. You could ping me. I know it's probably, let's see, it's 5:51 a.m. and where Ryan is. So you could ping him. You could ping me. Other than that, we'll let you guys go. And because me and Ryan, I want to talk to him about something else. So we're gonna talk about something else. And we're gonna do a little basics of everything. So we're gonna touch a little bit of Azure, then we're gonna probably go into maybe AWS, who knows? Maybe we'll go into Cisco, maybe we'll go into Citrix Xanapp servers and stuff like that. So we're gonna do a little bit of everything, but we want to take it one step at a time, baby steps. We don't want to go too advanced because no one's gonna understand what we're talking about. Like I could talk here with him all day about IT, but then no one understands is what's the point, right? So we have to make it understandable for everyone. So
I mean, absolutely. Like I say, we'll work through a wide range of topics, and everyone will be well-rounded in their IT skill set, and they can build on that from there. Having a solid foundation will give you the tools and give you the confidence to move forward in your own careers, no matter where they lead you. So, like I say, I'm having fun teaching you guys. I really, again, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate all of you taking the time to tune in and watch, because I know you're all busy. You've all got things going on in your lives. So taking the short bit of time to watch this, thank you so much. You guys all rock, and keep on rocking, because you guys are just awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for taking your time for being here today. I know you have your own schedule. It's like 6 a.m. over there. So thank you for taking your time to actually teach us and train us. I know you're an actual trainer, and I think you talked with me. You told me you actually worked with David Bombal and a few other people. So it's really it's actually a pleasure to have someone that actually knows what they're talking about, and they know how to teach it in a way that at least everyone understands it. It's just you cannot teach. You have to know how to teach someone in a non-technical way, because then it gets too complicated. And I don't promote that. I don't promote teaching someone with technical stuff and then they don't understand what the hell you're talking about. I don't promote that. So you have to understand what you're doing. You have to understand how to teach someone, and everyone has their own way of learning. Not everyone learns the same. So well, that's just the way it is.
Absolutely. I mean, and like David Bommel, he's probably, in my opinion, the best Cisco instructor that I've ever come across. Again, he's fun. I learned a lot of Cisco stuff through him. I mean, he's a CCIE. I mean, he's done some real big real world projects. And like I say, he's just awesome. And I've learned from other guys, and we all learn from each other at the end of the day. So like I say, at the end of the day, we're all helping each other. We're all sharing the knowledge, and we all have a common goal. And like you say, if IT is fun, then you want to learn it. But if someone's sitting there with a monotone voice, you can say, all right, I can't sleep at night. Okay, listen to Ryan, you'll soon fall asleep. You don't need rain music or anything like that, or calming music. And so, yes, again, like I said, I'll try and make it as fun as possible, and we'll try and enjoy it as we go along. Again, like I say, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and to be part of this event today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you're doing, Kevin. So thank you very much as well.
Thank you for being here. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope this helped you out. We'll be here next week with another session talking about some more Azure stuff, and it's going to be like a weekly thing, by the way. So if you missed this one, it's okay. We have another one next week, and then the week after that, and the week after that. So yes. And I'm going to make it into a playlist, so then you guys could go from A to Z. It's not all over the place. We're not doing that. We're doing like an order from A to Z. The one you guys. Oh, I'm gonna click on this video. No, I have to go to that one and that one. Just has to be in some sort of structure. We're not gonna go all over the place. So, with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys have a good Saturday. I don't know if Ryan has any final words he wants to say before we let them go.
The same. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. You guys have a good week next week when you start work again. And again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. All right, guys. You guys have a wonderful day. Take care. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. And